A homeless boy kept trying to break the billionaire's car window, making him angry and swearing. But when he knew the reason, the millionaire immediately knelt down and begged. The city baked under the weight of the afternoon sun, its concrete bones radiating heat like an open furnace. The streets shimmered, distorted by waves of rising air, and the few people outside moved sluggishly, as if wading through something thick and invisible. Vendors wiped sweat from their brows, adjusting umbrellas that barely cut through the relentless heat. In an alley nearby, a stray dog panted under the meager shade of a rusted dumpster, its ribs visible beneath patchy fur. Adam moved through the streets like a ghost, silent, unnoticed, forgotten. His feet, bare and calloused, scraped against the blistering pavement, but he barely felt it anymore. Hunger gnawed at his insides, a dull ache he had learned to ignore. His eyes, however, remained sharp, scanning the ground for anything, half-eaten scraps, a discarded coin, anything that could mean survival for another day. He had seen luxury cars before, their sleek, polished exteriors foreign against the backdrop of his world. He had watched men in pressed suits step out, never sparing a glance at those like him. But this car was different. Parked at the edge of the sidewalk, its engine off, its windows shut tight, it looked abandoned. As he passed, something caught his eye. He froze. Inside, behind the tinted glass, two small figures sat motionless in the back seat. At first, he thought they were dolls, the kind rich people left behind without a second thought. But then he saw it. The smallest, weakest movement, a twitch of fingers, a barely there shift of breath. His chest tightened. They weren't moving enough. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, mixing with the grime on his skin. He knocked on the window, lightly at first, then harder. No response. His pulse quickened. Someone had left them here. Someone had left them here in this heat. He turned, eyes darting around the street. People walked by, their minds occupied with their own concerns. No one stopped. No one noticed. The babies inside were dying. He could feel it in his bones. Adam took a step back, scanning the pavement until he spotted it, a broken brick, half buried in dust near the alleyway. His fingers trembled as he picked it up, its rough edges biting into his palm. He hesitated. Breaking the window meant trouble. Breaking the window meant someone would come running. But if he didn't... He clenched his jaw, lifting the brick with both hands. His arms, thin from hunger, trembled as he hurled it at the glass. Crack. The impact left only a spiderweb of fractures. Not enough. He gritted his teeth and threw it again, harder. This time, the glass shattered. Shards rained down, glinting in the harsh sunlight. The sound split the air, sharp and violent. Adam barely noticed. He was already reaching inside, ignoring the sting as tiny cuts bloomed on his fingers. He fumbled with the car seat buckles, his hands clumsy, shaking. The babies were limp, but warm, barely. He lifted one carefully, then the other, cradling their fragile bodies against his chest. Their skin was damp, their tiny lips cracked from dehydration. Too long. They had been in here too long. Then, a shadow loomed over him. A voice, deep and furious, rang out like a whip. "What the hell are you doing?" Adam flinched, instinct taking over. He tightened his grip on the infants, pressing them closer to his chest. He looked up. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face a mask of rage and confusion, stood over him. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the man's anger shifted into something else. The world seemed to slow as his eyes landed on the children in Adam's arms. Everything around them, the broken glass, the sweltering heat, the buzzing of the city, became nothing. Walter didn't move. His face paled, and his breath caught. For a long moment, he simply stared, his expression flickering between disbelief and raw terror. Then his phone rang. The sound was distant, unimportant. His hand moved on its own, pulling the device from his pocket and bringing it to his ear. A voice on the other end. urgent, frantic. "Sir, we have news. It's the twins. They were kidnapped this morning. Someone took them, but we lost the trail. We don't know where they—" Walter's knees nearly buckled. Kidnapped. His stomach twisted. His eyes darted back to Adam, to his bruised, sun-darkened face, his shaking hands holding the very children he hadn't even known were missing. Had this boy just saved them? The pieces didn't fit. Not yet. His mind couldn't catch up with the reality before him. All he knew, all he could process, was that if this boy hadn't been here, if he hadn't seen, hadn't acted, hadn't broken the rules, his children would be dead. He swallowed, his throat dry. "Give them to me." Adam hesitated, eyes wary, but something in Walter's voice, something desperate, raw, made him obey. The weight of his children settled in Walter's arms, and for the first time in years, he felt completely powerless. The sun had begun its slow descent, drenching the city in shades of burnt orange and muted gold. The air was still thick with heat, but the earlier intensity had softened, leaving behind a heavy, lingering warmth. Streetlights flickered to life one by one, their glow casting long, restless shadows across the pavement. Adam stood at the edge of the sidewalk, his arms wrapped tightly around his thin frame, the distant hum of the city washing over him. His body ached from the day's ordeal, but he wasn't thinking about that. His gaze was fixed downward, at the small, sleeping infants in the man's arms. Walter had barely moved since taking them, as if afraid they might disappear the moment he loosened his grip. His breaths were still uneven, his mind still trying to catch up with the terrifying reality he had only just escaped. Someone had stolen his children, someone had left them to die, and yet he would never have known, never have reached them in time, if not for the boy standing before him. Walter lifted his eyes to Adam, scanning the boy's face with an intensity that made Adam shift uncomfortably. "Where are you staying?" Walter's voice was quieter now, stripped of its earlier sharpness. Adam gave a small shrug, his expression unreadable. "Around." Walter's jaw tightened. He had seen enough in his life to know what that meant. The boy had nowhere. He exhaled slowly, glancing down at the fragile bodies in his arms, then back to Adam. His lips parted, then closed again. He looked away, shifting on his feet as if debating something with himself. Then, to Adam's utter confusion, Walter dropped down onto one knee. Adam stiffened, eyes darting around, unsure if this was some kind of trick. "Come home with me." Walter's voice was steady, but something raw bled through. It wasn't a demand, it was a plea. Adam flinched slightly. I don't need— "Let me thank you," Walter interrupted, but there was no force behind it. "Just one night, a real bed, a meal, that's all." Adam hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. The image of a home, a real home, was too foreign, too impossible. Walter didn't move. He stayed there, kneeling, waiting. A billionaire, kneeling in the middle of the street for a street kid like him. It didn't make sense. Adam swallowed hard. His instinct screamed at him to refuse, to turn and vanish into the city like he always did. But then he looked at Walter again. The way his hands trembled ever so slightly against the fabric of his expensive suit, the exhaustion in his face, the sheer weight of everything pressing against his broad shoulders. This man wasn't pitying him. He wasn't offering charity. He was just asking. Something in Adam cracked. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Walter let out a slow breath and, without another word, rose to his feet. The drive to the house was silent. The city blurred past them, the neon signs of convenience stores flashing against the windows, the faint sound of distant sirens disappearing as they left the crowded streets behind. Adam sat stiffly in the passenger seat, his fingers digging into the fabric of his shorts. The car smelled like leather and something faintly expensive, but underneath it all was the lingering scent of the infants, of their sweat-soaked clothes, of the heat that could have killed them. Walter was focused on the road, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Who had done this? Who had taken his children? The police would investigate. The cameras might reveal something, but none of it changed the truth. Someone had tried to take them away from him, and that knowledge left an acidic taste in his mouth. Walter stole a glance at Adam. He hadn't said a word since agreeing, if agreeing was even the right word, to come with Walter. It had been more of a reluctant nod, a flicker of uncertainty in his dark eyes, before he stepped into the car. Walter cleared his throat, gripping the wheel a little tighter. "You don't have to stay," he said, keeping his voice even. "Just for tonight. A place to rest." Adam didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the city beyond the glass, his reflection staring back at him. Walter forced his thoughts to quiet as they turned onto a private road, the city fading behind them. The mansion loomed ahead, bathed in the golden glow of exterior lights. Its towering windows reflected the fading daylight, its vastness almost indifferent to the two figures stepping into its warmth. Adam hesitated at the threshold, his bare feet scraping against the polished stone. Walter pushed the door open wider. "Come in," he said gently. Adam's eyes darted inside, scanning the space like a trapped animal searching for an exit. The grand foyer stretched out before him, high ceilings, sweeping staircases, floors so clean they gleamed under the chandelier's glow. Too big, too much. He didn't move. Walter watched him for a beat, then sighed, stepping inside first. "One night," he reminded, voice quiet but firm. Finally, cautiously, Adam followed. The warmth of the house wrapped around him, too soft, too foreign. The scent of something rich and unfamiliar filled his lungs, something clean, something safe. It unsettled him. A woman in a crisp uniform appeared, her expression a careful balance of curiosity and professionalism. "Sir, the doctor has arrived to check on the children." Walter nodded, running a hand down his face. "Good. Make sure they're comfortable." She hesitated. Her gaze flicked to Adam just for a second before she masked it with polite indifference. "Should I prepare something for the guest?" Walter glanced at Adam, who stood motionless near the door. "Food," he said, "and a bath." The woman nodded and disappeared down the hall. Adam shifted uneasily. "I don't need a bath," he muttered, barely audible. Walter didn't argue. Instead, he stepped forward and crouched down to the boy's level, meeting his eyes. "You don't have to take one if you don't want to." His voice was calm, without pressure. "But if you change your mind, it's there." Adam studied him warily. Trust was not something he gave away easily, and Walter knew better than to force it. The tension didn't break, but it loosened just enough for Adam to step further inside. By the time dinner was served, the house had settled into an unfamiliar quiet. Adam sat at the long dining table, the chair too big for his small frame. The meal before him was carefully plated, steaming soup, warm bread, fresh fruit, but he made no move to touch it. Walter watched, pretending not to notice, as Adam's fingers twitched against the edge of the table. "You can eat," Walter said finally, his tone light. "No one's going to take it from you." Adam shot him a look, sharp and assessing. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he reached for the spoon. The first sip was cautious. The second, a little quicker. By the third, the spoon barely touched the plate before being lifted again. Walter let him eat in silence. It wasn't much, this moment, but it was something. Later, as the night stretched on, Walter caught Adam standing near the window, staring out at the vast, quiet landscape beyond the glass. "You're not locked in," Walter said from the doorway. "You can leave whenever you want." Adam didn't turn. "I know." A pause, then, softer, barely a whisper. "I don't belong here." Walter exhaled, stepping closer. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but you don't belong out there either." Adam said nothing, But for the first time, he didn't argue. The city was still asleep when Walter awoke, the sky outside a deep shade of blue just before dawn. The house, despite its size, was eerily silent. The weight of the previous day still pressed against him, the reality of what had almost happened settling like a stone in his chest. He sat up, exhaling slowly. Across the hall, the twins were safe, their soft breathing filling the nursery. But it wasn't just them he was thinking about. He rose, moving quietly down the corridor. When he reached the guest room, the door was slightly ajar. Inside, the bed was untouched. Instead, Adam sat curled up on the floor by the window, knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped around his legs. His small frame was bathed in the faint, early light filtering through the glass. He wasn't asleep, nor did he seem aware that someone was watching him. His gaze was fixed outside, where the distant city lights still flickered. Walter hesitated, then knocked softly against the doorframe. Adam's head turned, but his expression didn't change. He didn't look startled or embarrassed, just tired, as if he had been expecting this conversation. "You didn't sleep in the bed," Walter observed. Adam shrugged, his voice quiet. "Beds make me feel trapped." Walter frowned slightly. It was such a simple sentence, but the weight it carried wasn't lost on him. He wanted to press, to ask why, to understand. But he had learned, in the short time he had known Adam, that pushing too hard would only make the boy retreat further. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe. "Come on, let's go out for a bit." Adam's brows furrowed. "Where?" Walter only offered a small, unreadable smile. "You'll see." The morning air was crisp, a welcome contrast to the previous day's unbearable heat. The streets were quieter at this hour, the usual chaos of the city still a few hours away. Walter parked near a small cafe tucked between old brick buildings. The place was unassuming, not the type of establishment people like him typically frequented. Adam hesitated at the entrance, glancing at the worn wooden sign and then back at Walter. "Why here?" Walter pushed the door open, motioning for him to follow. "I used to come here when I was younger." Inside, the scent of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the air. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with mismatched novels, their spines worn from years of handling. A few customers sat in the corners, some reading, others simply enjoying the quiet. Walter led Adam to a small table near the window. A waitress, a woman in her 50s with warm eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, approached. "Didn't expect to see you here, Walter," she said, glancing at Adam with mild curiosity. Walter smiled, a rare expression that softened his usually stern features. "Good to see you too, Martha." Her gaze returned to Adam. "What can I get you, sweetheart?" Adam tensed at the term, unused to such casual kindness. He glanced at the menu but didn't touch it. Walter, noticing the hesitation, spoke up. "Order whatever you want." Adam's fingers curled slightly against the table. His eyes darted across the options before settling on the cheapest meal, a plain buttered roll and a small coffee. Walter's jaw tightened, but he didn't comment. Instead, he turned to Martha. "Make that 2 full breakfasts, and a hot chocolate instead of coffee." Adam shot him a sharp look, but Walter only shrugged. "You saved my kids. You deserve more than dry bread." Adam didn't argue, but he didn't thank him either. The boy simply stared out the window, watching people pass by. When the food arrived, Adam hesitated again, staring at the plate as if unsure whether it was really meant for him. Then, carefully, as if expecting it to be taken away, he picked up the fork. Walter let him eat in silence. After breakfast, they walked a few blocks to an old bookstore. Adam didn't question it this time, he simply followed. Inside, the scent of aged paper filled the space, shelves stacked high with books of all kinds. There was a quiet hum of activity, people flipping through pages, the soft creak of wooden floors beneath careful steps. Walter watched as Adam moved between the shelves, his fingers ghosting over the spines of books, his eyes scanning the titles without truly focusing on any of them. "You like reading?" Walter asked. Adam shrugged. "I used to." Walter didn't push. Instead, he reached for a book, a classic, its pages yellowed with time. He held it out. "Take it." Adam blinked at him. "Why?" Walter arched a brow. "Because you used to." For a moment, Adam didn't move. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he took the book, holding it carefully, as if it might crumble in his hands. Walter didn't miss the way his grip tightened around it. Their last stop was a park on the quieter side of the city. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the distant sound of children's laughter echoed across the open space. They sat on a bench, neither speaking for a while. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It simply existed, stretching between them like something fragile, but not unwelcome. Walter exhaled, glancing sideways at Adam. "You know, you don't have to be on edge here." Adam tensed. "I'm not." Walter chuckled. "Liar." Adam scowled, but there was no real bite to it. Walter leaned back against the bench. "You're not a burden, Adam." Adam's grip on the book tightened. He stared down at his hands, his shoulders stiff. "You don't know that." Walter's gaze softened. "I do." The boy didn't look convinced. But he didn't argue either. For the first time, he wanted to believe it. The afternoon light filtered through the grand windows of the mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floors. The house had settled into an uneasy quiet, a fragile truce between its unfamiliar occupants. Adam sat curled in a chair near the library, the book Walter had given him resting unopened in his lap. His fingers traced the frayed edges of the pages, but his mind was elsewhere. He had spent the day adjusting, or at least trying to. The mansion was too big, too polished, too different from the life he had known. Every sound echoed, every movement felt watched. He wasn't sure if he belonged here, and deep down, he didn't believe it would last. People like Walter, people with power, with control, they always changed their minds. The distant hum of an approaching engine pulled him from his thoughts. He sat up, muscles tensing as the sound grew louder. The security gates whirred open, and a sleek black car rolled into the driveway. Adam watched as a man stepped out, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit before closing the door with calculated ease. Walter met him at the entrance. "Zachary," Walter greeted, voice measured but not unkind with his younger brother. Adam studied the man from his vantage point. He was tall, leaner than Walter, with a well-groomed look that seemed almost too perfect. His smile was sharp, his movements smooth, effortless, like someone who always knew how to manipulate a room. "I came as soon as I heard," Zachary said, stepping inside. "The twins, are they okay?" Walter nodded, rubbing a tired hand over his face. "They're safe now." Zachary exhaled, placing a hand over his chest as if he were truly relieved. But Adam saw it, the flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, the way his lips twitched ever so slightly before settling back into a mask of concern. God, Walt, what the hell happened? Who would do something like this? Walter shook his head. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Zachary's gaze drifted, finally landing on Adam. "And who's this?" Walter hesitated, just for a second. "That's Adam." Zachary's brow lifted, the curiosity in his expression turning sharper, more pointed. "And Adam is..." Walter's jaw tensed. "The boy who saved my children." A flicker of amusement passed through Zachary's face before he masked it with something more neutral. He turned to Adam, offering that same polished smile. "Well then, Adam, it looks like we owe you a debt of gratitude." Adam didn't respond. His instincts prickled, his gut twisting at the way Zachary studied him, not as a person, but as a puzzle he was trying to solve. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Dinner that evening was tense. Walter had insisted that Adam join them, and though he had no appetite, he complied. The dining room was massive, the table long enough to seat more people than it ever would. Adam sat at one end, next to Walter, while Zachary occupied the seat across. The conversation started light. Talk of business, of legal teams investigating the kidnapping, of the media speculation. Walter seemed weary, his responses shorter than usual. Then, casually, Zachary turned to Adam. "So, kid, where are you from?" Adam kept his gaze on his plate. "Around." Zachary chuckled. "Vague. I like it." He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "And what were you doing when you stumbled upon my dear nieces and nephews?" Adam pushed the food around his plate. "Walking," Zachary hummed. "Alone?" Adam's fingers curled around his fork. "Yeah." There was something unsettling about the way Zachary watched him, the way he probed, as if searching for cracks. Walter must have sensed it too, because his tone sharpened. "Zachary." His brother raised his hands in mock innocence, "just getting to know our little hero." Adam didn't trust him. Not the way he moved, not the way he spoke, not the way he wore his charm like a well-tailored suit. It was the kind of charm that had layers, the kind that hid things Adam had learned to recognize. That night, long after the house had quieted, Adam slipped out of bed. Something about Zachary didn't sit right. His instincts had kept him alive on the streets, and right now, those instincts were screaming. He padded barefoot through the dimly lit corridors, the mansion stretching like an endless labyrinth. The doors to the twins' nursery were closed, the faint sound of their breathing machines filtering through. He exhaled, relieved. Then a voice, low, hushed, drifted from down the hall. Adam stilled. He moved carefully, his steps silent against the expensive flooring. The sound was coming from one of the rooms, a study, he guessed. He pressed his back to the wall, heart hammering, straining to listen. "Don't worry about him. Walter's as naive as ever." It was Zachary. Adam clenched his fists, a pause. Then, "Yes, the situation was messy, but we'll handle it. I said we'll handle it. He doesn't need to know." Adam's stomach churned. Zachary's voice dropped even lower, but Adam caught one word. "Illegal." His breath hitched. Zachary laughed lightly, as if amused by whatever was being said on the other end. "Relax, I told you. I have him exactly where I want him." Adam's chest tightened. His instincts had been right. Zachary was dangerous, and Walter didn't see it. The next morning, Adam waited until Walter was alone in his office. He hesitated only for a second before pushing the door open. Walter glanced up from his desk, brows lifting. "Adam?" Adam took a deep breath. "I heard Zachary last night." Walter frowned. "What?" "He was on the phone. He was talking about illegal deals. He was mocking you, saying you wouldn't find out." Adam's pulse pounded. "I don't think he's here because he cares, Walter. I think—" Walter sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Adam." "I'm serious." Walter stood, his voice softer now. "Zachary has always been dramatic. He exaggerates. He plays things up. He's reckless. But he's not—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "He's my brother." Adam's jaw locked. "And that makes him trustworthy." Walter exhaled, his gaze heavy with something unreadable. "It makes him complicated, and don't think badly of him." Adam stared at him, disbelief curling in his chest. Walter didn't believe him. He was making the same mistake Adam had seen so many people make, trusting the wrong person just because they shared the same blood. Adam wanted to argue, wanted to shake him, make him see, but he didn't, because he knew what happened to kids like him when they pushed too hard. So instead, Adam swallowed down his frustration, took a slow step back, and said nothing at all. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that settled heavily in the air, pressing against the walls like something unseen but suffocating. Adam sat on the edge of his bed. No, not his bed. Just a bed. One that wasn't his, in a house that wasn't his, surrounded by people who weren't his. His fingers curled around the fabric of his borrowed clothes, his chest tightening. He had thought, maybe, just maybe, Walter was different. That this place could be different. But he had been wrong. He had tried to warn Walter, had tried to tell him that Zachary wasn't what he seemed. And yet, Walter had brushed him aside, dismissed him like his words meant nothing. That was the moment Adam had known. No matter what Walter had said before, no matter how kind he had been. At the end of the day, Adam didn't belong here. The weight of that realization pressed down on him like a stone. He stood, moving with quiet precision. Years on the streets had taught him how to disappear without making a sound. He didn't have much, just the few belongings Walter's staff had given him, which felt more like props than possessions. He left most of them behind. All he took was the book Walter had given him, tucked under his arm like something fragile, something worth holding on to. And then he slipped out the door. Walter woke with a start. Something was wrong. The house was still cloaked in darkness, the world outside barely stirring. But there was a hollow feeling in his chest, a weight that told him something had shifted. He moved quickly, pulling on a robe as he stepped into the hallway. His bare feet pressed against the cool marble as he walked, a growing sense of urgency creeping up his spine. The guest room door was open, his stomach clenched. Walter stepped inside, his breath catching at the sight of the untouched bed, the absence of the boy who had slept curled by the window just the night before. Adam was gone. A sharp, unfamiliar panic gripped his chest. He turned, moving faster now, checking every room, every possible place the boy could have gone. But the house remained silent. By the time he reached the front door and saw it slightly ajar, his worst fear was confirmed. Adam had left, and Walter had no idea where to find him. If you were Walter, in this situation, would you trust Adam? If yes, leave comment number 1, otherwise write number 2. The city streets were colder than Adam had expected. The temperature had dropped since the day's suffocating heat, and now the wind cut through his thin hoodie, like it wasn't even there. He had nowhere in mind, no plan, just the instinct to keep moving. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. Hunger was nothing new. The lights of the city stretched before him, the glow of neon signs and street lamps painting everything in muted golds and deep blues. He followed them, weaving through familiar alleys, past shuttered shops, past the places he used to sleep before all of this. At some point, he stopped behind a restaurant. The smell of expensive food drifted through the air, and his body betrayed him, his legs moving before his mind could catch up. It was instinct. Survival. He crouched behind the dumpsters, waiting for an opportunity, for someone to toss something out that wasn't completely spoiled. But then, laughter. Low, smooth, confident. His head snapped up. Through the side window, he saw him. Zachary, seated at a round table with a group of men, a glass of whiskey in one hand, his body language loose, relaxed, completely different from the way he had acted at Walter's house. Adam's stomach twisted. The men he was with didn't look like the polished businessmen Walter met with. They were harder, their suits more casual, their expressions sharper. There was something dangerous about them, something calculated. Zachary leaned in, saying something Adam couldn't hear. The men laughed, one of them clapping him on the back. Adam stayed hidden, his instincts screaming now. This wasn't just a casual meeting. This was something else, something wrong. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay still. Whatever was happening here, he needed to hear it. And for the first time that night, Adam felt something other than anger or exhaustion. He felt purpose. The cold, sterile walls of the police station pressed in around Walter as he sat in the dimly lit office, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Across from him, Detective Langford flipped through a thick case file, his expression unreadable. Walter had spent the past 2 hours answering questions, reviewing evidence, listening to accounts that didn't seem real. Yet, the truth sat there in front of him, sprawled across documents and security reports. Langford sighed, finally setting the file aside. "Mr. Shepherd, I need you to listen carefully." His voice was firm but measured, as if he knew the weight of his next words would crush everything Walter believed. Walter exhaled sharply. "Tell me." The detective leaned forward. "Your brother, Zachary, orchestrated the entire thing. The kidnapping, the planted evidence, the media leaks. It was all him." Walter's breath caught in his throat. Langford continued, flipping to a page in the file. "Based on our findings, 3 individuals were hired to carry out different parts of the operation. The first was responsible for abducting your children from the daycare. He used a false authorization under your name and had prior knowledge of your usual routines, which allowed him to avoid suspicion." Walter's fingers dug into his palms, his nails pressing into his skin. "The second operative had one job: to disable the security cameras at the parking garage where your car was parked. By the time you arrived, there was no digital evidence of anyone placing the twins inside your vehicle." Langford flipped to another page. "And the third?" He exhaled through his nose. "He's the one who actually placed your children in the car, locked the doors, and walked away." Walter's vision blurred for a moment. The image of his twins, left to suffer in the sweltering heat, hit him harder now than it had the day it happened. The detective didn't stop. The cameras in the parking lot were all broken. Luckily, a couple's car that had been traveling all week had been parked there, so the dash cam had recorded the scene that afternoon. "I asked them to extract the cameras, to collect evidence, and find the identities of those people." Langford's voice grew colder. "The goal was simple: to make it look like negligence. A scandal, a tragic mistake that would destroy your public image and force you out of your own company. Your brother was setting you up to take the fall, ensuring that by the time the truth surfaced, it would already be too late." Walter felt like he was suffocating. Zachary, his own brother. His stomach twisted with something bitter, something violent. Langford let the silence settle before speaking again. "But the worst part, he didn't care if the children lived or died. If they had been found just 10 minutes later, we'd be having a very different conversation." Walter's hands trembled. A sharp pang of nausea rolled through his gut, the weight of everything pressing down on him. Langford studied him. "I assume you see it now." Walter inhaled shakily. His voice, when it came, was hoarse. "I see it." But then, another realization crashed into him, colder than the first. Adam. Langford flipped one last page. "That brings us to the only reason we're sitting here having this conversation." He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Adam." Walter's chest tightened. Langford closed the file. "That boy overheard everything at the restaurant last night. He stayed long enough to hear Zachary bragging about the plan. And when he had enough proof, he did what no one else could. He got someone to call us." Walter's throat felt tight. Adam. Adam had been right. Langford leaned forward, his voice quiet but sharp. "He tried to tell you, didn't he?" Walter shut his eyes for a long moment. His own words replayed in his mind. "Zachary has always been dramatic. He's my brother. Don't think badly of him." God. He had dismissed Adam, had pushed him away when he was the only one trying to help. And now, Walter straightened abruptly. "Where is he?" Langford hesitated. "We don't know." Walter's pulse thundered. "He disappeared last night," Langford continued. "Left your house sometime before dawn. We've already sent out a search, but—" Walter didn't wait for him to finish. He bolted out of the office. The city was colder tonight. Adam pulled his hoodie tighter around himself as he walked, his stomach twisting with hunger, his limbs stiff from exhaustion. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't go back. Walter didn't believe him. That much had been clear. And Adam had learned, long ago, what happened when you stayed where you weren't wanted. His fingers curled around the book Walter had given him, the only thing he had taken when he left. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe he still wanted to believe. No. He shook the thought away. He didn't have time for things like hope. His stomach ached, a sharp reminder that he hadn't eaten since the morning before. He glanced around, scanning the streets until his gaze landed on a high-end restaurant, the kind of place where people barely finished their meals before leaving half a plate behind. He lingered in the alley behind it, waiting. The back door swung open. A waiter stepped out, tossing a bag of discarded food into the dumpster. Adam moved fast, reaching for it before it could sink too deep into the garbage. Then, laughter. Adam froze. He turned his head, his breath catching as he looked through the large window. Inside, sitting at a private table, was Zachary. Adam's stomach twisted violently. Zachary wasn't alone. He was surrounded by men in expensive suits, drinking, laughing, completely at ease. Not worried, not in hiding, like nothing had happened. Adam inched closer, his heart pounding. Zachary leaned back, sipping his whiskey, a smug smile on his lips. And Walter still has no clue. The men laughed. One of them, an older man with a scar across his cheek, leaned forward. "So it's done?" Zachary smirked. "Oh, it's far from done." "But Walter..." He scoffed. "He's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet." Adam's grip on the plastic bag tightened. His instincts screamed at him. He had to listen. He ducked behind the dumpster, pressing his back against the cold metal. Zachary's voice drifted through the glass, smooth and confident. "The fun part is, he still thinks I care. Poor Walt, always trusting the wrong people." The other men chuckled. Adam stayed still. He listened. And this time, he wouldn't let anyone ignore the truth. The city pulsed under the weight of the night, the streets alive with flickering neon and the low murmur of distant traffic. Walter's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he sped through the streets, his mind racing faster than the car. He had checked every alley, every spot where someone like Adam might have gone. Nothing. The fear that had settled in his chest refused to ease. Then, as he turned onto a quieter street, someone, caught his eye. A small figure, hunched near the side of a high-end restaurant. Adam. Walter's heart pounded. Relief surged through him. But before he could call out, Adam's head snapped toward him, eyes wide with urgency. Adam pressed a finger to his lips. "Watch first. Listen." Walter hesitated. Then, following Adam's gaze, he turned toward the restaurant window. Inside, Zachary sat at a private table, completely at ease, surrounded by men Walter recognized instantly. His biggest business rivals. Walter's stomach twisted. The men surrounding him weren't just associates. They were his rivals, the very people who had been circling his company like vultures for years, waiting for a moment of weakness. And now, Zachary was handing them that moment. Walter watched in sick realization as his brother slid a folder across the table. One of the men, a well-known executive from a competing firm, opened it, his mouth twitching into a pleased smile as he skimmed the documents. Contracts, insider information, deals that would ensure Walter's business collapsed before he could even recover from the scandal Zachary had orchestrated. It all clicked into place. The kidnapping had been just one piece of a larger plan. Zachary didn't just want Walter humiliated, he wanted him erased. Adam shifted beside him, eyes flicking up to gauge Walter's reaction. Walter's pulse pounded in his ears. He had been so blind. Adam had seen it first, and Walter, like a fool, had dismissed him. Now, everything was laid out before him in damning clarity. Zachary's voice, smooth and calculated, drifted through the half-open window. "And once the board sees these numbers, they'll have no choice but to cut him loose. He's already drowning in bad press. He took a sip of whiskey, then smirked. It's over for him. Walter's fists clenched. He had to stop this. Adam moved first. He slipped toward the side entrance, quick and silent. Walter followed, his breath tight in his chest. Near the kitchen doors, a middle-aged waitress was gathering trays. Adam darted toward her, gripping her sleeve. "Call the police," he whispered. She startled. "What?" Adam's fingers tightened. "Please, just tell them. Zachary Shepard is inside. He's making illegal business deals. It's serious." Walter stepped forward, voice steady but firm. "He's committing fraud. If you call now, they'll catch everything." The waitress hesitated only for a moment. Then, without another word, she disappeared into the back office. Walter exhaled, his heart hammering. Now, all they had to do was wait. The tension inside the restaurant was thick, the murmur of conversation a muted hum beneath the grand chandeliers. The scent of aged whiskey and seared steak filled the air, but to Walter, it all smelled like betrayal. Without hesitation, he pushed through the restaurant doors, the force of his entrance sending a wave of silence across the room. The quiet clatter of silverware, the shifting of eyes. People noticed. But Zachary, seated at his private table, merely glanced up, mildly irritated. "Walter," he greeted smoothly, setting his glass down with a practiced ease. "Crashing dinner now? That's not like you." Walter's breath came slow and measured, his jaw clenched tight. He had given Zachary too many chances. Not anymore. "Cut the act." Walter's voice was dangerously low. "I know everything." Zachary's brows lifted, amusement flickering in his gaze. "Everything." He smirked. "Now that's a bold claim. Care to clarify?" Walter stepped forward, ignoring the startled glances from nearby patrons. His gaze never left his brother's. "The kidnapping," he said coldly. "The fake negligence reports. The planted evidence." His voice dropped further. "You set it all up. You nearly killed my kids." Zachary's smirk faltered for just a second, just enough for Walter to see the flicker of unease beneath his well-crafted mask. Then, just as quickly, Zachary leaned back, exhaling slowly, shaking his head like he was the victim of some grand misunderstanding. "Walter, you sound insane," he gave a short laugh. "Do you even hear yourself? Kidnapping. That's absurd." Walter took another step forward. "Save it." His eyes flicked to the open folder still on the table, the contracts tainted with his company's stolen secrets. "I caught you in the middle of your next move." Zachary's fingers tapped against the rim of his glass. The men sitting around him shifted uncomfortably, some of them realizing they had just become collateral in a much bigger disaster. But Zachary, he didn't blink. Instead, he exhaled through his nose, his smirk returning. "All right, Walt," he murmured. "Let's say, for argument's sake, that I did all of this." He tilted his head. "Why would I?" Walter knew the answer. He had always known, but it still made him sick to say it. "Mira." The moment her name left his lips, Zachary's expression twisted. The smugness melted away, something far darker surfacing beneath. Walter felt his stomach turn. "You blamed me," he murmured, realization sinking in. "For everything." Zachary's hands curled into fists. "You don't get to say her name." Walter stared at him, finally seeing the truth that had been festering for years. Zachary wasn't just after his company. He had been after revenge. "She chose me," Walter said quietly, "and you never forgave her for it." Zachary let out a sharp breath, laughing bitterly. "She didn't choose you, Walter. You took her." His voice dropped, the mask finally slipping. "She should have been mine." Walter shook his head. "She made her choice." Zachary's eyes burned with something dangerous, and then she died because of it. The words hung heavy between them. Walter felt his heart constrict, but he didn't look away. "You blame me for that?" Zachary's jaw clenched. Of course I do. His voice was low, sharp. She died giving birth to your children. Your children killed her. Walter inhaled sharply. Everything snapped into place. Zachary's hatred, his calculated vengeance, the ruthless way he had orchestrated every single move. This wasn't just about power. It wasn't just about business. It was personal. Walter felt sick. Zachary had been waiting for a way to punish him, to destroy him, to take everything he had left. And Walter had trusted him. The weight of betrayal settled into Walter's chest like a stone. I looked up to you, he murmured, his voice raw. You were my brother. Zachary scoffed. No, Walt, I was your shadow. His eyes darkened. And I'm done living in it. A sudden commotion near the entrance broke the moment. Walter turned just in time to see police officers flooding the restaurant. Zachary barely had time to react before Detective Langford stepped forward, his badge gleaming under the chandelier's glow. Zachary Shepard, Langford said, voice firm. You're under arrest for corporate fraud, conspiracy, and child endangerment. The restaurant erupted into chaos. The men at Zachary's table immediately backed away, distancing themselves as officers moved in. Zachary stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. You can't be serious. Langford didn't blink. We have recorded evidence, witness statements, and documents tying you to every charge. His gaze flicked to Walter. And a very compelling motive. Walter didn't speak. He had nothing left to say. Zachary turned back to him, rage twisting his features. You did this, he spat. Walter's expression didn't waver. No, Zachary. His voice was steady. You did. The officers grabbed Zachary's arms, snapping the cuffs into place. You have the right to remain silent. Zachary barely struggled. He only held Walter's gaze, his lips curling into one final bitter smile. Then he was dragged away. The room was quiet now, save for the murmurs of onlookers and the distant sound of sirens outside. Walter exhaled slowly, his shoulders heavy. It was over. Finally, it was over. The city lights blurred against the car window as Walter drove in silence. The echoes of Zachary's final words still clung to him like a sickness, their bitterness sinking deeper than he wanted to admit. The betrayal, the hatred, the years of resentment festering beneath every forced smile and half-hearted handshake. He had spent his life believing that no matter what happened, family would always be family. But now, Zachary was gone. Walter clenched the steering wheel, knuckles white. Beside him, Adam sat quietly, arms wrapped around himself, gaze distant. He hadn't said much after the arrest, hadn't asked what came next. Walter glanced at him, the weight of his own guilt pressing down like a vice. Adam had been right. From the beginning, he had seen the danger Walter refused to acknowledge. He had tried to warn him, and Walter, like a fool, had pushed him away. He had failed twice. First, by not believing him. Second, by letting him walk away. Walter took a slow breath, the words sticking in his throat. Adam. The boy didn't look at him. Walter gripped the wheel tighter. I owe you an apology. Adam's fingers twitched slightly against his hoodie, but his gaze stayed on the window. You already said that. Walter exhaled. Not properly. A pause, then, I should have listened to you. Adam blinked, the faintest flicker of surprise crossing his face. Walter kept his eyes on the road, his voice steady but quieter now. I should have trusted you. Instead, I made you feel like you didn't belong, like you weren't worth believing. He swallowed, and I was wrong. Adam shifted, pulling his knees up to his chest. His silence stretched long, thoughtful. Then, finally, yeah, you were. Walter let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He deserved that. The mansion loomed in the distance as they pulled into the long driveway. But home had never felt more unfamiliar. Inside, the house was too quiet. The warmth of the evening hadn't touched it. The grand halls, the polished floors. Everything felt colder now, as if the weight of what had happened had seeped into the walls themselves. Walter stood near the doorway, fingers grazing the edge of a marble counter, his thoughts swirling. Zachary was really gone. Adam lingered by the entrance, his posture stiff, uncertain. He wasn't looking at Walter, but he wasn't looking for the door either. Walter hesitated before finally stepping away from the counter, moving to sit in one of the chairs by the fireplace. He ran a hand down his face, exhaustion pressing deep into his bones. Adam didn't leave. Instead, he walked over, slowly, cautiously, before sitting down on the other chair. He didn't say anything, but he stayed, and for some reason that mattered. The quiet stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, sure, but it wasn't empty. After what felt like an eternity, Adam finally broke the silence. At least the twins are safe. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, but it cut through the weight in the room like a blade. Walter lifted his head, his eyes meeting Adam's. This boy. This kid who had no reason to care, no reason to stay, had never left his side, even after everything. Walter studied him for a long moment, then slowly, "Do you want to stay here?" Adam didn't answer right away. He looked down, tracing an invisible pattern on the armrest. His shoulders tensed slightly, like he was bracing for something. Walter didn't push, because for the first time, the thought of staying didn't scare Adam. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Walter's office, casting long shadows over the dark mahogany desk. The air inside was still, thick with the weight of finality. Walter stood with his hands resting on the pile of documents before him, legal papers severing every last connection he had to Zachary. He had already made the calls. Zachary's name had been wiped from the company's board, his assets frozen pending legal action. Every lingering influence, every deal his brother had manipulated, was being erased. It was the only way forward. His eyes drifted to the name printed at the bottom of the last document, his own. The signature line waited, the ink of his pen hovering over it. One final stroke, and it would be over. Zachary would no longer have a claim to anything. Walter's fingers tightened slightly around the pen. He had spent a lifetime believing that family was unbreakable, that blood meant something even when it hurt. But Zachary had never seen it that way. Walter inhaled slowly, signed his name, and set the pen down. It was done. Down the hall, Adam sat quietly in the nursery. The twins lay curled up in their cribs, their tiny hands resting against soft blankets, their breathing even and peaceful. Adam wasn't sure why he kept coming here. Maybe because it was easier to be near them than anywhere else in the house. The twins didn't look at him like he was a guest, or like he didn't belong. They just existed, unaware of the chaos that had nearly taken them away. One of them, the girl, shifted slightly, her fingers curling against the edge of the blanket. Adam hesitated. Then, moving carefully, he reached forward and tucked the fabric around her. A small sigh escaped her lips, but she didn't wake. A strange tightness settled in Adam's chest. He didn't know what it was. "You don't have to do that, you know." Adam turned sharply. Walter stood in the doorway, watching him with an expression that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't unreadable either. Adam shrugged, looking away. "I wasn't doing anything." Walter stepped inside, his gaze flicking to the cribs, before settling back on Adam. "You've been spending a lot of time in here." Adam didn't answer. Walter leaned against the crib, crossing his arms. "You like them?" A beat passed. Then, quietly, "They didn't do anything wrong." Walter's chest tightened. He understood what Adam meant. The twins hadn't chosen to be born into all this, just like Adam hadn't chosen the life he had been given. For a long moment, Walter didn't say anything. Then, finally, he exhaled and straightened. "Come with me," he said. Adam blinked, frowning. "Why?" Walter didn't answer. He just motioned for Adam to follow. They stopped outside a door Adam had never been inside before. Walter pushed it open, and Adam stepped in hesitantly. It wasn't a bedroom, it was an office, but not like Walter's. A large desk sat against the wall, but instead of contracts and reports, there were books. A bookshelf lined one side of the room, filled with different subjects: science, history, fiction. Next to it, a sleek computer sat on the desk. Adam's stomach turned uneasily. "What is this?" Walter stepped beside him. "Your study." Adam tensed. "I don't need a study." Walter sighed, leaning against the desk. "Adam, you deserve more than just surviving." His gaze was steady. "You need a future." Adam's throat felt dry. He looked at the books, the computer, the way everything was prepared for him, like he already belonged here. "I got you enrolled in school," Walter continued, as if sensing the storm of emotions brewing inside Adam. "A good one. Small class sizes, good teachers. They'll work with you to catch up." Adam's stomach twisted. School. The idea of it felt foreign, like something that belonged to a different life, a different kind of kid. Walter hesitated before adding, "I also got you a private tutor if you need help." Adam turned sharply. "Why?" Walter looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Because I want you to have every opportunity I can give you." Adam swallowed hard. "I don't need—" "You don't have to decide now," Walter interrupted gently, "but it's there, when you're ready." Adam's fingers curled at his sides. He hated this, hated the way it made something ache inside of him. No one had ever given him choices before. No one had ever prepared a future for him. Walter watched him carefully, then knelt down, meeting Adam at eye level. "I'm not doing this out of pity," he said softly. "I'm doing this because I care." Adam wanted to argue, wanted to tell Walter he didn't belong in a place like this, with a future like that. But for the first time, he didn't say anything. Because for the first time, he wanted to believe Walter. The days stretched into weeks, and with them came quiet changes. Small, almost imperceptible at first, but undeniable. Walter had expected resistance, hesitation, maybe even defiance. But Adam surprised him. He didn't push back. He didn't run. Instead, he stayed. He still didn't speak much, and trust was slow in coming. But Walter didn't rush him. Some things weren't meant to be rushed. The adoption process started quietly. Walter didn't tell Adam at first, not because he wanted to hide it, but because he wanted to be sure that this was something Adam wanted too. The legal paperwork took time, but Walter worked through it methodically. He had spent his life building contracts, negotiating deals, but this was the most important decision he had ever made. It wasn't about charity. It wasn't about obligation. It was about family. Adam struggled with the idea of belonging. Some days he was present. He sat at the dinner table. He walked through the house like he was beginning to accept that it could be home. Other days he withdrew, disappearing to the nursery or sitting for hours in the study, flipping through books without really reading them. Walter let him be. He had learned that Adam would come to things in his own time, but the changes were there. One evening, Walter walked past the nursery and saw Adam sitting on the floor, one of the twins, the boy, resting against his knee. Adam wasn't speaking, just watching the infant in quiet fascination, his fingers gently tugging at the baby's tiny hand. Walter didn't interrupt, because in that moment he saw something rare. Acceptance, not entirely, not fully, but the start of it. Walter had prepared everything for Adam's education. The best school, the best tutors, a place where Adam could catch up, where he wouldn't feel like he had already fallen too far behind. When Walter finally told him, Adam's reaction was quiet. "You don't have to do this," he had said, voice carefully neutral. Walter had only met his gaze and replied, "I want to." Adam had looked away, but for once he didn't argue. That was progress. Some things still took time. Adam hated shopping for clothes, so Walter had the staff bring options to the house instead. Adam barely glanced at them, muttering, "Just pick whatever." Walter didn't. Instead, he told the staff, "Only what he chooses stays." Adam sighed but went through the clothes anyway, begrudgingly selecting a few things. It wasn't much, but he chose them. And that mattered. One afternoon, Walter took Adam to visit a local charity. It was a foundation he had donated to for years, one that worked with homeless youth, helping them find shelter, education, opportunities. Adam didn't say much as they walked through the center, watching kids his age, some younger, some older, talk to social workers, eat warm meals, receive the kind of help he had never gotten. Walter expected Adam to be distant, guarded, but instead, Adam asked, "How do they find the kids?" Walter studied him, then answered, "Some come on their own. Others are found by outreach teams." Adam nodded slowly, thoughtful. A week later, he asked to go back. Walter didn't question it. He simply took him. The shift was slow, but it was real. One day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Walter found Adam standing outside, watching the sky burn gold and orange. Walter approached quietly, standing beside him. "You doing okay?" Adam shrugged. "I guess." Walter took a breath. Then, steady and certain, he knelt. Adam turned, startled. "What are you—" Walter met his gaze, voice quiet but firm. "You will never be alone again." Adam froze, not just in movement, but in something deeper. For so long, he had been waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the moment when Walter changed his mind, when all of this turned out to be temporary. But Walter wasn't leaving. And for the first time, Adam let himself believe it. Maybe, just maybe, he really did have a home. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. And if you enjoyed this story, please share it with your friends on WhatsApp. And now, share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values yet entertaining. See you there.